Welcome back to Academic Insights, Preparing for Disaster, sponsored by American Military University on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guest today is Dr. Chris Reynolds, Dean and Vice President, Academic Outreach and Program Development at American Military University. Dr. Reynolds, again, thank you for being here. This has been such a great learning opportunity for me. And you've talked about social media a couple of times already throughout our conversation, but with social media consumption so high right now, and I believe it's at an all-time high, how do you see it playing a role with first responders working in the field?
Oh, a critical role.
Really?
Absolutely a critical role.
Do they have time for it, though?
Well, sure they do. I mean, it's part of the intelligence gathering.
Okay.
In other words, in any disaster, you know, you have the response element, and under NIMS, the National Incident Management System, where you've got an incident commander, you have operations planning, logistics, and finance. You have different roles people play in a disaster. Part of that role is gathering intelligence, collaborating with, like a liaison with other agencies. Social media is a big part of that. You know, think of the intelligence that can be gathered. You know, if, for example, you've got a hurricane that comes through, we teach and preach that individuals should have 72 hours of subsistence available. They should be able to be alone or survive rather without other assistance for at least 3 days. That gives responders a time to get into the disaster area. Now, typically we beat that extensively, but we still try to encourage people to do that. Well, social media, has the capability for an emergency manager to send a message out to entire community using that social media aspect to alert people, you know, that your area has been stricken, that they probably already realize that anyway, but help is on the way. You know, and you can look at also in terms of the use of social media with the Amber Alerts. You know, if somebody kidnaps a child, you know, I know in the state of Florida, they send out an Amber Alert right away, and it absolutely hits all the telephones, you know, which is important. And Twitter has that capability. And Twitter is just one tool. There are other social media tools that responders use.
And what are some of the other social media tools out there?
Well, you know, one everyone's familiar with is Facebook. And, you know, what's good about Facebook is that Facebook's proactive. In fact, they know if a disaster's happened to a certain area, they'll set up a page that allows people to check in so loved ones know that they're okay. You know, and that's been used quite a bit. You know, I know that when we had Hurricane Michael came through last year, it came through the Panhandle and hit Pensacola, hit my old Air Force base, Tyndall Air Force Base. It basically wiped the base out.
Wow.
Facebook set up their application for people around the country to make sure that their loved ones that may have been in that area were okay. Now, it required the individual that was in the stricken area or in a shelter to go onto Facebook and say that I'm okay, but it allowed families to know that they're all right. So the benefit of that is that families aren't tying up the cell phone towers, you know, if they're trying to call it a cell phone. You know, most state emergency management officials have the capability of switching the system so that priority track is given to responders. So that essentially cuts out a lot of extraneous cell phone traffic. So Facebook, that application, allows folks to know that they're okay. Instagram's the same way. Any method by which people can communicate with one another via text or live feed or by walkie-talkie type of application is an advantage.
You've talked already about the at AMU Disaster Crew Twitter handle, and I'm interested in just a little bit more detail on how that brings value to your work and helps essentially the people using it.
Well, you know, one can think of the AMU Disaster Crew as a critical communication node. And essentially what a node is it's a central location where information comes in. And the information that comes in isn't necessarily brought in by any one individual, it's sent in by other individuals. In our case, you know, we have several hundred followers, of which include many local and state emergency management offices. You know, we have direct feed from FEMA, the 10 FEMA regions. We cover them and they cover us. So it allows them, when they tweet out something, it comes to AMU Disaster Crew and our followers are made aware of it. We also have the capability too, if, for example, and this ties in the classroom, if we've got a disaster management class that's going on right now, and we have students and faculty that are in that class but now have been called out to work the disaster, they can use the AMU disaster crew as a comm hub, a communications hub again, to communicate with one another back to the class. You know, because we all realize that, you know, when disasters happen, everything else sort of goes out the window. You know, but they have that capability of that communications back to their colleagues. And it becomes a learning event. It's a live lab.
Yeah. How can the field of EDM be improved?
Well, again, going back to what I was we were chatting about earlier, there's always time for improvement. I think the most important thing that one can do to improve EDM is individual preparedness. I think that is absolutely key. And that's not necessarily something that disaster management officials accomplish. What they really need to do is educate their citizens, educate the folks that live in their communities to be self-sufficient, to be prepared, to have a plan. I mean, think about most people have children or have family members, you know, and you think about what happens when a disaster occurs. It doesn't occur when you expect it to occur. It occurs in the middle of the night. It occurs when you're at work, your family's somewhere else. You know, it's nice to know that there is a plan in place that the family can talk and communicate with one another.
Meeting point, all that.
Exactly, a meeting point, know where evacuation shelter locations are so they can get there. Those that don't have a plan, you know, essentially they have nothing to go by. And think of how frantic a parent would be if they couldn't find their child, you know. So part of that individual preparedness includes being able to be self-sufficient for 72 hours.
So just real quick, does that mean more government assistance? How would that play out?
Not necessarily. You know, I think one of the flaws we get into is that I think a lot of people think that the government is going to save us. You know, the federal government, particularly FEMA. FEMA is not a response agency. Disasters occur locally. They happen in a community, and the people that reside in that community are served by their EMS, their fire, their law enforcement, their public works, public services. So they handle it locally, and if they need mutual aid, then they bring in departments or agencies from other surrounding areas or from other states. You know, and we have the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, basically, which is an agreement between the governors of different states that say that we will send you mutual aid if you need it. So the government's not necessarily going to come in and save. So there really isn't an increased cost in terms of, you know, more personnel and equipment. It's more education.
Gotcha. I'd like to thank today's guest, Dr. Chris Reynolds, Dean and Vice President, Academic Outreach and Program Development, American Military University. I'm your moderator, J.J. Green, and you're listening to Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com, search Academic Insights.